Today, we're talking about how the Kim dynasty could come to an end, and even North Korea might actually disappear from the map. At the end of 2023, Kim Jong-un cried. Not because of war, not because of sanctions, and definitely not because of his pleasure squad run of pretty girls. He cried because North Korean women stopped wanting to have kids. This happened in December 2023, when Kim Jong-un hosted National Mothers Conference. On stage, Kim Jong-un begged all moms to have more babies for the country. While speaking, he put out a handkerchief and started wiping his eyes over and over. Now, I don't know if his acting was any good, but I can tell you the audience outperformed him. From old ladies to young wives, everyone was crying like they were up for an Oscar. It turns out when you get a gun pointed at your head, anyone can become an award-winning actor. But here's the real question. Why did Kim Jong-un, the man who always loves to look tough, suddenly burst into tears in public? The answer is pretty simple. North Korea is facing the biggest crisis since the country was founded, a population collapse. Because of dictatorship, famine, and economic chaos, North Korea's population has been dropping fast. And according to the demographic model, if this decline continues, the regime will eventually collapse. In other words, North Korea might literally vanish from the map. So what exactly went wrong with North Korea's population? Why are people refusing to have kids? And could this really bring down the Kim's regime? That's what we are diving into in today's episode. Hi everybody, I'm Tony. Before we start, please smash that like button, hype this video, and subscribe to this channel. Every time I talk about North Korea, this channel gets flooded with dislikes and nasty comments. So your support helps cancel out those hates. So if we want to talk about North Korea's population, we have to start right after Korean War. The northern half of the Korean peninsula is mostly mountains and has cold weather, not exactly ideal for agriculture. So naturally, its population density was always lower than the south. And after the Korean War, Kim Il-sung realized one simple truth. People are not just mouth to feed, they're soldiers, they're workers. So basically, people are resources. He started stressing out about one thing, how to make more people. And really, there are only two ways. Either make more babies or import more immigrants. He first started to encourage women to have more kids. But of course, yelling slogans that make babies magically appear. So he rolled out a bunch of policies. If you had more kids, you got extra food rations, priority for housing. And if you really went all out, they would even give you this fancy title called a hero mother. Free daycare centers popped up everywhere, so mom could drop off their babies and rush right back to work. Now, all this was possible because North Korea's economy back then was actually doing shockingly well. Why? Because they were swimming in what I like to call sugar daddy diplomacy. Both China and the Soviet Union at the time were throwing money at Kim, each trying to prove they were the real communist big brother and the true leader of the communist world. And for Kim, whoever pays more would be the real boss. And that was basically his foreign policy. In the 1960s, North Korea's GDP per capita was actually 1.6 times higher than South Korea's. And on top of pushing people to have more babies, he also set his sights on immigration. So he started calling on Koreans living in Japan to return to the motherland. At the time, post-war Japan was still a mess. Jobs were scarce, even for Japanese citizens. For Koreans, it was way worse. They were discriminated against, broke, and hopeless. Then Kim Il-sung shows up on TV and talks about this so-called socialist paradise. Free housing, free education, free healthcare, and basically free everything. And a lot of people actually bought it. Between the late 1950s and 1960s, about 100,000 Koreans left Japan and moved to North Korea. Of course, it was a trap. Most of them were labeled as hostile class as soon as they arrived, meaning they never got the chance to take on good jobs, blocked from applying higher education, never allowed to visit or live in Pyongyang. Most of them spent the rest of their lives in poverty and hunger. I actually talked about this in my other episode about North Korean poet Jang Song. I have dropped the link in the comment section. Please watch that one after this video. It will blow your mind. So thanks to Kim Il-sung's baby-making campaign and his comeback immigration push, North Korea's population jumped from 8.5 million after the Korean War to 14.5 million by 1975. But while Kim was busy celebrating that, South Korea's population had already hit 25 million. And by the 1970s, South Korea's economy took off. That period became known as the miracle of the Han River. At that point, South Korea didn't just have more people than the North. Its economy was also catching up fast. And by the mid-70s, South Korea's GDP per capita had officially surpassed North Korea's. And that really got under Kim Il-sung's skin. Watching South Korea pull ahead economically, well, that hurts. So he decided to pull off something big, a genius move to catch up. In my last episode, I called Kim Il-sung a military genius. the man who managed to lose 95% of his country's territory in just merely 4 months. But he wasn't just a military genius, he was also an economic genius. Because what he did next didn't just tank North Korea's economy, it was also send the country's birth rates into a freefall. See, Kim wanted to industrialize North Korea, just like South Korea did. But factories need machines and modern technology. And all that stuff costs money. And North Korea? Yeah, they broke as usual. Remember that sugar daddy diplomacy? But by the 1970s, the Soviet Union was going through its own economic downturn. So Moscow's generosities started drying up. So what did Kim do? He went all in and made one huge gamble. In the late 1970s, North Korea issued around 680 million Deutsche Mark and 455 million Swiss francs in international bonds. The plan was to use that money to buy machinery and modern equipment from the West. But let's just say things didn't go as planned. Here's the case, you see, buying machines is one thing, running them is another. North Korea didn't have the talent, the management, or the know-how, and the state-owned factories were horribly inefficient. So even with the shiny new machines, production stayed terrible. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the global oil crisis hit. From 1973 to 1980, oil prices jumped almost tenfold. That made North Korea's import costs skyrocket, while its exports, mostly cheap minerals and raw materials, barely went up in price. The result? A massive trade deficit. Soon, the country couldn't even pay off its foreign debt. So Kim Il-sung, being Kim Il-sung, pulled his classic move. He just said, you know what, I'm not paying. In 1984, North Korea officially defaulted on nearly $1 billion in debt owed to Western banks. That single move destroyed its international credit rating. North Korea was kicked out of global financial markets and never recovered. By that time, South Korea's population had hit over 40 million, while the North was stuck at around 17 to 18 million. The gap between the two Koreas just kept getting wider, and it's been that way ever since. Fast forward to 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, China started its market reform, and both of North Korea's sugar daddies basically said, yeah, we're done funding you. So without foreign aid, North Korea's economy went into freefall. Its fragile food supply chain collapsed, and the famine spread across the country. This was the period North Korean propaganda called the Arduous March. From 1994 to 1998, somewhere between 2.4 to 3.5 million people died of starvation, roughly 10 to 15% of the entire population. In just that 4 years, North Korea lost more people than during the entire Korean War. Starting in the mid-1990s, people started escaping. Defectors risked being shot, imprisoned, or punished along with their families. But they still fled, mostly towards China and South Korea. And that's another kind of population loss. From 1994 to 2018, several thousand people escaped every single year. Meanwhile, the regime brought back public execution, a gruesome way to keep everyone terrified and obedient. Those killed in purge and execution, also part of demographic decline. In 2008, the North Korean government finally released its first population report since the famine. It claimed a total population of 24 million. That same year, South Korea's population passed 49 million, literally double the North. Then when Kim Jong-un took power in 2011, he introduced what he called the Beijing Line policy, also known as the Parallel Development Strategy. In theory, it means building up both the economy and the military. In practice, it means focusing on the military. Now, North Korea might lag behind in almost every area, except one, military spending. For the past 10 years, North Korea conducted 6 nuclear tests and hundreds of missile launch. During that time, its military budget took up somewhere between 25% and 33% of the GDP, meaning nearly 1/3 of the entire economy went into weapons. That's the highest ratio in the world. Most normal countries keep defense spending under 10%. Today, the only country that even come close is Ukraine, and that's during an actual war. But North Korea isn't getting any outside help like Ukraine. So to keep funding its military obsession, the regime had to cut deeper and deeper into public spending, and the people suffered for it. By 2021, Kim Jong-un shamelessly announced yet another arduous march. But this time, the crisis looked different. But for the first time, North Korea was facing an aging population. And aging, of course, is the first warning sign of population decline. It means more people are dying than being born. Pyongyang claimed to have 25.8 million people in 2021, but over 11% were already 65 or older. North Korea, once obsessed with boosting its birth rates, was now quietly slipping into an aging society. Now, aging society are not just a rich country problem. According to international standard, If over 7% of country's population is above 65, it's considered an aging society. If that number goes above 14%, it becomes an aged society. And if it passes 20%, congratulations, you are officially a super-aged society. But to be fair, North Korea isn't the most extreme case here. The main reason is that life expectancy in North Korea is way shorter than the developed countries. When people are starving, I guess it's kind of hard to grow old. Countries like Japan, Italy, and Portugal are already super aged. South Korea crossed into aged society zone long time ago. And in 2022, China officially joined the club too. So yeah, it's not just North Korea facing this issue. But the problem is, everyone else at least have ways to fix it. So what do I mean by that? The solutions are pretty straightforward. The first one, government pays people to have kids. Japan started doing this back in 2003, handing out all kinds of subsidies, child allowances, education grant, you name it. South Korea followed suit in 2010, with monthly child support and birth incentives, increasing year after year. The goal was simple, making young couples feel like, yeah, raising kids is exhausting, but at least it's not bankrupting us. The second way, immigration. Countries like Japan and South Korea have been loosening their immigration rules to bring in more foreign workers. Between 2000 and 2025, Japan accepted about 1.9 immigrants, and South Korea brought in 2.5 to 2.6 million. But of course, neither of this option works for North Korea. The economy was already collapsed. The government can't afford to hand out baby bonuses. And as for immigration, yeah, good luck with that. I always joke this with my friends. If someone offered you $10 million to move to North Korea, would you go? I've asked tons of people, not a single of them said yes. If anything, once the border opens, more than 90% of North Koreans would probably try to run the other way. As long as the Kim family stays in power, the country will keep burning money on its military while keeping its door shut tight. Then came another blow that made things even worse. In 2022, North Korea's state media officially admitted that COVID had hit the country, claiming over 4 million infections. But thanks to the great leader Kim Jong-un's loving care, only 71 people supposedly died. Yeah, anyone with half a brain knows that number is a joke. In reality, the country's healthcare system is falling apart. There is barely any ICU equipment or antiviral medicine. Food shortages are so severe that nearly 40% of the population lives in chronic hunger, which means extremely weak immune system. If you factor in real COVID death toll, the population crisis in North Korea is probably way worse than what we see on paper. So honestly, if the situation hadn't gotten this bad, Kim Jong-un probably wouldn't have put out that tearful performance at the National Mothers Conference. So after generations of brainwashing, are North Koreans really going to answer the dear leader's call to have more babies for the country? According to defectors, the regime does have so-called incentive program for young mothers. After giving birth, every woman receives a generous government subsidy. How much, you ask? 3,000 won, roughly $3.3 US. That's barely enough to buy a pound of coarse grain, not even rice. For most families, it's basically worthless. As of 2024, around 80% married women give birth at home, not because they want to, but because the transportation barely exists. Even women who live near hospital often choose not to go, because the hospitals in North Korea are freezing, filthy, and lack heating or electricity in the winter. Giving birth there could literally kill you. So most women deliver their babies on their own, right at home. Because of chronic malnutrition, many pregnant women are skin and bones, and the babies they give birth to are frail and sickly. And just a few days after delivery, these women are forced to get up and go back to work, with bodies still too weak to even stand straight. In 2021, a woman in her 30s who escaped North Korea told South Korean researchers her story. Her face was completely blank as she said, "I once had a baby." Hospital technically offered free checkups, but she never went. She was too busy hauling good, trying to survive another day. Even if she stopped working even for one day, she would starve. She said she was still working right up until the day before labor. When the baby was born, it died within minutes. She didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. She didn't look, she didn't want to know. Life was just too hard, too exhausting. After saying that, she lowered her eyes to the floor, and a single tear shimmered at the corner of her eye. Stories like this explain why most young women in North Korea today don't want to have children at all. Even if they get pregnant, many secretly choose to have abortions. And remember, abortion is illegal, and can get you sent to a labor camp. But still, many women take the risk, because in their eyes, raising a child in North Korea is even crueler punishment than the camps themselves. According to UN population data, by 2025, North Korea's population will be around 26 million. with a fertility rate of about 1.7 to 1.8. By 2050 to 2060, it will officially become a super-aged society. And if things continue, North Korea's population could drop to 10 to 15 million by 2080. Keep projecting that trend forward, North Korea's population will hit zero by the year 2300, completely disappearing from the map. Of course, it's just a mathematical model. In reality, a country never vanishes because its population hits zero. What actually happens is, when the population falls to the point where the regime can no longer extract enough resources to sustain itself, the system collapses first. So if North Korea keeps going down this path, the Kim regime will fall long before the last person disappears. And that's exactly what Kim Jong-un is afraid of. At this rate, within 30 years, North Korea's regime could crumble from within. Brought on not by war, not by sanctions, but by demographics. Honestly, I've got a simple solution for Kim. Instead of putting on his Oscar-worthy crime performance, maybe just try economic reform. Feed your people, let them live normal lives, and I guarantee the birth rate problem will fix itself. But of course, every Kim, from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-un, believes one thing. If North Korea ever follows China's path of economic reform, the Kim dynasty will collapse. Sounds dramatic, but it actually makes perfect sense. Because the Kim's family's power isn't built on economics, it's built on divine leadership. And economic reform, that means openness. That means information flow. And information flow is the one thing they fear most. Because the moment people see the outside world, especially how well South Koreans are living, the entire Kim myth shatters. But here's the irony. Look at China or Vietnam. After they opened up their economies, their communist regime didn't collapse. They actually got even stronger. Why? Because they swapped ideology for a new formula. It's called economic growth in exchange for political obedience. In other words, we give you good life, you let us stay in charge. Now, Westerners might find that hard to believe, but for people in China, that's just common sense. That logic has been around since the emperor, for over 2,000 years. So to them, a good ruler who brings prosperity is still a story people are happy to accept. Taking Singapore as an extreme example. It's not communist, but it's a Chinese majority society, about 70% ethnic Chinese. Under Lee Kuan Yew and his son, Singapore has been ruled by the same family for more than half a century, and nobody's protesting dictatorship there. Why? Because that family turned a tiny island into one of the richest economies in the world. And the people are grateful, even proud of their benevolent dictatorship. And that's why I believe North Koreans, deeply influenced by Confucius' value, just like people in China, Vietnam, and Singapore, could also accept the same political logic: economic growth in exchange for stability. So in reality, Kim Jong-un shouldn't be so paranoid. If he just opened up the country, brought real reforms, and actually improved people's life, he could still be king, even a beloved king. A ruler remembered not for his tears, but for leading North Korea into a better future. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe. With that, I will see you in the next one.